Good evening and welcome to the January 19th special budget meeting. Members of the public have been provided with the following methods to watch and/or participate in this open meeting. Attend in person at the township office. Second, watch the live stream by accessing the meeting on the township's YouTube page. Third, attend electronically to observe the meeting or speak to an item on the agenda by registering with the clerk's division in advance, or submit written comments to the clerk's division that have been provided to the mayor and council and will form part of the public record. I'd like to now call the meeting to order, and can I have approval of the agenda, please? Scott.
Moved by myself, second by Councilor Roman, that the council adopt the January 19, 2023 special budget meeting council agenda that is presented with the following items. 1, add item 6.3, report number PW-01-2023, Piper Street Sidewalk Extension, 2023 capital budget, Piper Street neighborhood meeting. Number 2, add item 6.4, memorandum from Andrew McNeely, Chief Administrative Officer, regarding discussion paper number 2 for the 2023 capital budget, provision of electric vehicle EV charging stations.
All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. I would now like to do the Indigenous Territory Acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. We offer this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation between the Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples of Canada. And I can't tell you how proud I was of the elders for doing doing the research on Buddy Miracle, who was the first Indigenous hockey player in the NHL. Congratulations to Kitchener Rangers, or the New York Rangers, for sending us a copy of the shirt that we have hanging in the hall here. And also for now, last week, he was recognized in the Hockey Hall of Fame as one of the first Indigenous. But without the News doing that research, it would never come to light. We are at the time that shirts were given from an NHL. The Miracle family came here, and we had a special service with them. And then Chief Hill at that time, Ava Hill, came here, and a centennial game was presented with a shirt to take back the Six Nations to hang up in there. Yeah. So, and her last words to me was, "Sue, this is reconciliation." So let's remember, reconciliation is not always money in your land. It's respect of each other. So let's pause, concentrate on respect. Thank you. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Seeing none. Items for discussion, we will start with the report number Finance 01-2023 draft budget. Continued discussion relating to capital budget and business plans. Christina Bronski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will share my screen so that I can show you my presentation. So tonight we are going over the 2023 proposed capital budget in its draft format. Sorry, 1 second. Apparently I have too many things open. The agenda for today is we will look at the changes that were added since you saw it and it was released in December. We'll talk about some of the highlights to the program. We'll talk about the items that have been pre-approved and then next steps. The proposed changes, and some of this we did go over on Tuesday night. We have the addition of the fire hall equipment donation revenue that we are receiving, and then the purchase of the training props, as the chief describes them, which is a entry door and some mannequins for testing and training on defibrillators. There is the correction to the in-progress project for Schmidt Park, which correctly reflects now the full amount approved by council in August. And then there is two other amounts where we have talked about the costs that have come in for the parkette construction and the neighborhood park construction. The two amounts, when we were truthing out the numbers with our landscape architect, they've come in higher than the proposed budget. So there is the suggestion that we increase that as well.
Christina, when we get to that increased amount, we come to it.
Yes.
Thank you.
So some of the highlights that I just wanted to go through were the biggest project we have every year is our annual roads project. So again, we take a look at which roads are in most critical need for replacement. We have been, over the past few years, increasing the amount we are spending on the roads reconstruction by about 5%. And looking at our asset management, our state of the infrastructure study, we look to see which roads are in most need, and that is where we direct the funds to. Sometimes those projects come in a little less than expected, so then we may be able to tack on a smaller project that is not in as dire need, but would fit in with the program. The other thing we have in the capital, and so for the 2023 proposed budget, we are proposing $1.2 million to be for the various roads resurfacing. And that is funded through the use of, it still says gas tax here because that's how we all refer to it, but it's now called the Canada Community Building Fund. Our OCIF grant as well, which is the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. And then the balance will be paid out of our aggregate reserve account. In 2023, we are also proposing to complete the street light LED conversions of top posts within the township. We did do a section of them in 2018. Good. I was going to say 16 accidentally, but 2018. And so this would convert the rest of them. And that is again being is a savings we will experience over the years then from energy costs, but it also helps with our green initiatives as well. For the first time in a few years, we have some projects that are actually introducing some stormwater asset maintenance projects. We had attempted to go to market in the fall for one of them, and the bids came back very high. So that one has carried forward to attempt to rescope the project and see if we can have a more appropriate results. And then we have another small project being the Hunt Pond as well, clean out for 2023, so that we are trying to phase those in and start maintaining those assets on a regular basis. As always, we have vehicles that are coming up for renewal. We have the Deputy Chief Prevention Crew Cab that we will be looking to acquire, and as well as a 1-ton hoist truck. These are the normal replacement of them. Where possible, we are looking at hybrid vehicles. So the fire deputy chief vehicle, we are looking to purchase a hybrid pickup truck for that one. The other major projects as well is the new park and the parkette construction. Those items are of significant dollar amounts. They are being funded through our development charges, but that is a fairly substantial influx into our parks department. And then some of our larger projects continue on this year as we were unable to fully complete them in 2022, such as Schmidt Park, as we've already spoken of, and a few other ones where we were waiting on delivery of items or the supplier to complete. In December, we asked for pre-approval for a few items so that we would be able to go out to market this month to be able to do some additional costing ahead of time and then perform out the tendering processes so that we could make sure that we have enough lead time for things that take a long time now to acquire, such as playground equipment. In addition, the vehicles were taking over a year in the past. We believe that's a little shorter now, but again, 9-10 months is not outrageous at this point. And then by getting out in this time frame, we're hoping to get some better pricing for some of our linear infrastructure as well. So listed on the slide is the ones that you pre-approved in December. There are 2 other ones by resolution that we are asking you to pre-approve so we can get the tenders out, and that is the parkette and the park construction as well. So that was the end of my slide presentation. I didn't know if there were specific questions on any of the individual projects themselves, or if we wanted to just open it up to questions.
Councilors? Let's open up to questions. Do you have questions, anyone? Go, Councilor, you want to start?
Madam Mayor, do you want to just refer to the budget book, I guess? That's what we do.
Sure.
All right, so on page 2 of 16. Page 4 of 16. One of the things I noticed 6 talks about procurement enhancement phase 2, and I just wanted to get some clarification as to what we're talking about. I know that with big tenders, you can either fill out the forms online, or you can fill the forms by downloading the PDF, filling it out, and then scanning it. Is there an additional fee from bids and tenders to do this, or is this something that we have to know? How does this work? Who can answer this?
I can take that question, Madam Mayor, if that's acceptable.
Please.
Through you to the Councillor Roman. We have started some of the process for going to the bids and tenders. So right now we only accept tender processes through bids and tenders. So everything has to be submitted electronically. However, we have not turned on all of the features. Right now, it's still very manual process in that when we send the information out, we are uploading PDF documents. The contractors are then downloading them and having to fill them out to re-upload. There are other features that we can acquire and turn on, which will allow that process to go fully digital. And that is what we are looking at in this phase 2 enhancement.
Madam Mayor, through Christina. So with my business, I do a lot of work with the tenders as well. One of the things that most of my clients, which are school boards across Canada, most of them seem to have a pre-qualification section. So what you do is you pre-qualify with a certain set of criteria, and then you're able to bid on a number of jobs without having to go through an RFP or through a tender. This
is from start to finish, that there's independence review. All of those documents are created for us and then digitally filed. We will be able to, as part of our records management program, if I migrate this over to our archival system, so it's automatically then put into the digital file as part of our archive system as well.
And the last part of that is this is a one-time expense, or is this going to be now added to a yearly expense?
This is by to capital, it's a one-time to move into this phase 2 implementation mode. So that's what we're asking the dollars for this year to allow us to add those additional components. And it's a one-time capital contribution to deliver the phase 2 rollout.
If no other questions, Councilor Roman, you have another question?
My question is regarding, looking at this, the sheet now, the capital budget sheet here, I have a number, C7, engineering design for Drew Street. This is, I know we talked about a number of times. I'm just wondering how close are we to having this project moving forward?
So, Madam Mayor, I'm going to ask Lee Robinson if she would speak to this. She's the most familiar with the current status of work.
Through the mayor to Councillor Roman. Sorry, I'm getting a really bad echo on this end. The project is underway. We have about 75% drawings from the engineer, and we will be continuing to work with them to get a final version of the drawing so that we're able to issue it for construction.
For what year doing construction? Yes.
The capital forecast shows the construction in 2024.
So, Councillor Roman, as part of the 2023 program, it's the finishing up of the engineering drawings. It's the neighborhood information session. It's adjustments that may come out of the design from that neighborhood consultation component. It is the final called design for council to basically approve, especially if we're changing components of the road itself. And it is the, excuse me, the preparation of the tender ready document so that council is comfortable with the final design. We will be able to go into the marketplace either at the very end of 2023 or early 2024 into the marketplace.
Councilor Roman.
Madam Mayor, so are we bundling this project then with C4 with the Hall Street project? Because I thought we were doing View Street first and then Hall Street second, but it looks like now they're both coming down at the same time. This is a change to our schedule, right?
So in the 10-year forecast, which we'll be discussing on the 26th, Hall Street is at a later period of time. What's in the 2023 capital is the engineering design for Hall, Manly, and McDonald. But the actual construction, reconstruction of Hall Street, I'll just pull my capital forecast, but the 26.
2025.
No. Is it 2025 or 2026?
Hall Street is 2025.
Okay. So reconstruction of Hall Street would be 2025. So design this year. Construction, if council adopts the principles of the 10-year forecast, would be in 2025.
My next question is item C13, the streetlight conversion. I'm glad we're getting all the streets converted, but the next question is, when we finish that part of the project, we have to look at all the dark areas. When I look at Northumberland Street, the extensions, and part of the Swan Street, I feel the village seems to be sort of strange place in some of the streetlights. It's a lot of dark areas when you're walking. So I'm wondering, what is I didn't see the business plans and staff. I'm wondering, what is the plan to deal with adding LED streetlights to more parts of the village and perhaps more parts of the township?
So there's a couple of issues there. In some of our older parts of neighborhoods, we have, as you identified, gaps between street lights, and as such, you do not have uniform lighting along portions of the network. And that's largely attributed because the luminaires were affixed to the hydro poles. So the hydro pole spacings, or where they were placed in the road allowance, or crossing the road allowance in some cases, was based on what hydro needed because that was the primary user. They installed the poles, they strung their lines to support the residences or businesses that flanked that location. We, over time, affixed our light standard to their hydro pole. So that's why you have, in some cases, you do not have uniform lighting. So as part of road projects where we are reconstructing or we're building new sidewalks, we are also looking at whether or not there's an issue with lighting and the opportunity to tune in. We have this issue in the rural area as well, as it relates to some of our intersections. It's dark in the countryside during substantial portions of a typical day, and of course it's exaggerated during the winter season. This year, we're starting to put signage in advance of some of those intersections to give forewarning that there is a stop sign or there's intersections ahead. That's an initial investment to assist our motoring public, and it's being targeted exclusively in wards 3 and 4. We have a little over 175 signs to install just for that pre-warning component at various intersections in the rural portions of wards 3 and 4, where it's a township controlled intersection. The region obviously is the dominant party where a local road intersects a regional road, or the province is where a local or regional road intersects the provincial highway, like Highway 24 or Highway 8. So I'm only talking about local to local. We're also, and one of the things that our afternoon shift is responsible to do, not only are they looking at where luminaires have burnt out so that they can be recorded and we can make arrangements for the contractor to come in and replace the luminaire, but we're also looking at gap assessments. So where are we seeing significant shadows? Is it affecting either the motorist or, where applicable, a pedestrian along a sidewalk system, both in the rural area and in the urban portion of Ayr. So when I look at the rural portion, there's really two issues: the settlement areas, and then some of those rural intersections across the countryside itself. And you're looking at a multi-year phase and strategy, because each street light will need its own energy source, and obviously installation by a contractor. So you sort of now have to triage where are your more dangerous locations or safety related. You list your inventory of where you've got deficiencies, and then you start scaling them on a priority basis, typically related to a safety related issue. So think of a blind curve, think about a significant change in grade, perhaps hidden intersections would be typical part of your scoring evaluation.
Thank you, Stephen. Are there any further questions? Councilor.
Mayor, I'm just wondering about section D in this paper, facilities. Are we going to go through all of them? I don't know if the two new councils are aware of projects we're talking about with the council office or the original fire hall, the public works depot, the thing had the ACC, all that stuff. Will we do that one by one, or?
So we're going to go through that now, or what were you thinking?
It is up to council. There is in the budget book a description of each project, so I didn't necessarily plan to read through each description. However, if we do want to have a discussion of where those projects are at, I would be happy to entertain that.
Councillor, your thoughts?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd like to know what it is, if it's something that we need to do this year or do another year, depending on what we can do to succeed this year.
How are you going to do this, Mr. Ross?
So is the council's request to focus on section D of the capital projects, or do you want us to go through each project in the 2023 spend?
I think we were talking about the major projects such as the town halls, the ACC, the ADCC, things like that, major projects. Steve, Councillor Tui.
I do have a couple ones from the non-major ones that I'd like to discuss as well, but if we do the major ones on.
Why don't we start with yours first?
Oh, okay, that's
Go
good. So it's actually not listed, and I apologize. It's something that came to light just recently. Cheese Factory and Maple Manor Road. I've actually personally had a very serious accident there about 20 years ago. And I know there's an issue there. It's the biggest issue is the fact that it's something. And I think myself and Lee had this conversation when we had this meeting some time ago. Excuse me. And going through what I believe the issue is Cheese Factory comes up and it goes to Maple Manor Road. Now I have it on the screen. I can share my screen so we can actually see this, or I can kind of verbally try to describe it.
I know the area. Do you know the area?
It's a place that has suffers like quite a bit of accident. I don't know any statistics, but I just know from living out there, it's pretty bad. And what happens, they come up Cheese Factory and there's a three-way stop. They don't want to stop it on the Cheese Factory Road, obviously, because it's not the safest place to do so on the incline. What I perceive as the issue is the traffic that comes to Maple Manor Road that's heading can't see down Cheese Factory. And this happened to me, like I said, 20 years ago. I couldn't see what's going on. And what there is berms that are built up around, and it's I guess it would be in that easement area. I would imagine, like where it's actually township controllable property. I'm not exactly sure about that, but there's berms that are actually blocking the view. My recommendation, based on what I've seen when it was, and I don't know if it's something that we worry about now or before something happens again or whatever. But if we were to actually lower and actually adjust the finish of the ground so we can actually see around the corners, I think that would almost solve the problem. Not exclusively, but do a much better job than it's doing now. Because right now you have to pull out far enough, and that's where I lost the front end of my car. My girlfriend that's not my wife car. I pulled out far enough and it was just gone. My car was coming through 100 and some odd kilometers an hour. Just ate the whole front end. So I got blamed for it because I didn't stop at the stop sign, but I was pulling out to see. So sorry, that's a personal.
What was Lee's comment when they asked?
She recognized it, but at that point I didn't have the suggestion, and we both identified it as something that I can definitely Lee remembers to let her speak to that.
Lee, would you like to touch base on that?
Certainly, through the mayor to Councillor Tilley, what I had advised at the time that we'd had that discussion was that it is an intersection that was going to be reviewed as part of the 2023 our standard work program, and that we would be bringing forth suggestions for council's consideration at that time as part of the 2023 works, but not including the capital works, because until we determine what the appropriate solution is, it's hard to estimate what the costs were, so they were not included in the budget forecast.
Yeah, so we will evaluate once we have a report. Is that okay? Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Councillor Tilly. And there was another one you said?
Yes, yes, please. The additional one is another conversation that I've had as well with the treasurer and CAO about Jenkins Court, and this is item C4, PW Jenkins Court storm clean out. I know through the conversation that we had back in that day that there's some more investigation investigation going on into that pond water clean out, that there was any contaminants beyond the, Mr. McNeely, you had mentioned that you felt that there was salt, probably 100% going to be in there, plus whatever. With that report, and the more that we can give to put on bids and tenders is going to help keep this pricing down, because looking at price tag, and I know why it's been adjusted, because 110 wasn't accepted last year. And I just think that even 110 is outrageous still and maybe I've got it on my screen again, but maybe I can understand a little bit better, because right now, honestly, I see a small, we won't call it a stream, but we'll call it a means by which the water to move from there to the forest. That's all needs to be cleaned out, just clearing that out. And I just don't see a price tag at that level for that. And that's why I'm trying to see if there's some way to work on it, not to critique.
See you again.
People have to turn their mics on. So, Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Tilley, I think I'm going to let Ms. Robinson speak to it, because she's the one who's been working with the consultant on the nature of the work to be done, as well as I'm going to use the word, the chemical analysis, in terms of what the sediment has told us and what level of contaminant it would be, because obviously the more contaminated it is, it goes to a different type of facility. So in other words, if it's a nominal, it could be perhaps covered at the landfill. But if it's got other products in it, it may have to go to Lambeth or Sarnia or Hamilton to actually be cleaned. And obviously, the more sophisticated the cleaning or distance of travel, the higher per cubic meter it is to remove the product.
Through the mayor to Councillor Tilley, the stormwater management ponds are notorious for being extremely expensive to clean out, etc. To give you an idea, Jenkins Pond has not been cleaned out for its entire lifespan. There is more than 3 meters of fill or sediment that is built up in the bottom of that pond. So there's a significant excavation that's required in order to do that. In addition to that, the Hickenbottom drain, which is what filters it, which allows us to discharge the provincially significant wetland, is not functioning as intended anymore. So there's a significant amount of work that's required to do that, to ensure that we're in compliance with all of the environmental aspects of discharging in that area to a provincially significant wetland. The cost of the clean out is in keeping with what other municipalities are paying to keep that, or to clean out that pond. To give you an idea, I have cleaned out other ponds of similar size that are typically in the neighborhood of $500,000 to clean out. So what has transpired over the years through the development community is a change in the way the ponds are designed, so that sediment isn't able to migrate throughout the entire pond. So our newer ponds that are coming online through the development community have isolated areas which will significantly reduce the costs, because we're able to access them appropriately and be able to clean them out on a more regular basis in a much more cost-effective manner. Unfortunately, this pond is of a different era, and because the sediment has been allowed to build up, there's a large volume of material that needs to come out of that pond, as well as the work that is taking place to do with that. We have engaged our geotechnical firm, and they are working on testing the sediment so that we're able to get much tighter prices and much better prices with less risk being assumed by either the contractor or with the municipality. We'll have a better idea of what we're doing. Unfortunately, the price that is shown in the capital budget is in keeping with what everybody is currently paying for the removal of material from a stormwater management pond.
Do you have a time frame for all these things that are happening with this, please?
The tender, as soon as we have the information back from the geotechnical consultants, we'll be able to put the tender out. And as soon as the capital budget is approved, we'd be in a position to have that issued and bring it to council for award. So
When do you expect information?
we should have the test results back in 4 to 6 weeks. They're just finishing up some of the work that they're doing on them now.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Chair. Okay, so now the capital budgets. Which one you want to start with first? Or do you want to go once? Which you?
Well, I guess the question I have, and I'm sure the treasurer can answer this, is if some of these projects don't go ahead, it won't really affect the budget because it's coming out of reserves, right? So, question I guess I have of the two new councilors is, do we need to make decisions today on these projects, or do we need to deal with them as they come up throughout the calendar year?
Do you want to take it, CEO McNally?
So the capital budget isn't being approved tonight. Okay, it'll be part of the overall budget. The advantage of having at a future meeting, the budget approved is it does a couple things. It then enacts the work program for staff. It also gives credibility to the reserve continuity that you're going to be discussing as part of your 10-year forecast, because we've accounted for these projects as part of that reserve continuity over the period of the forecast. It also signals to the private sector, because in some cases it influences them or members of the public, what we're actually going to be doing, perhaps in their neighborhood or in proximity to them. And it's also part of our messaging when we talk about an approved budget. We give an overview of what we're doing as a corporation as part of a general public engagement. So if you don't approve a capital budget and we do it project by project in the months to come, technically we have to open up the budget again. I know it's not affecting the tax levy, but council has to then have a report. There's got to be a resolution, and then we can move ahead in our work schedule. So there would be, depending upon what kinds of projects we're talking about, significant duplication in process.
It also affects how we cohesive the two of them, so that we're making sure we're putting aside reserves to meet the demands for whatever projects we want to go for. But I see what you mean. We've got a number of things on there, and how are we going to move them out? And again, I think the 26th would probably be a better time to figure out the time frame on when we're going to do these things, if we want to do anything sooner or later. Christina?
Madam Mayor, if I also may remind council that with our purchasing policy, the significant dollar items, when we go to tender for those, they come back to council for approval of the award. So there is another opportunity to relook at the projects there. It's not that you're going to cancel the project necessarily there if they're in budget, but there is further discussion at council. By approving a capital budget, it also allows us to move forward with having those tender documents done and not coming back to say, can we go to the market, and just adding further delays to the time.
Councilor Tilly?
I know you had mentioned this to me before, but I've forgotten the number. What is the considerable amount, the sizable amount?
Everything over $100,000 must come to council. Anything between 50 and 100, we are doing the formal process, and on a quarterly basis, we'll be reporting how they were awarded to council.
And the other report that would come to council through procurement is if the project is under 100,000 and is listed here with a spend amount, and the actual bids come in higher than what the budget has been established, that overage has to be reported to council, and council has to decide to go ahead with the project or not. Okay, so for sake of argument, we're buying a pickup truck. We budget 45,000, comes in at 48,000. When we go to the marketplace, we have to come to council for approval to spend the extra 3,000 and the means in which we're paying for that. So we had some projects last year that were over budget. We came to council and said, these prices make absolutely no sense in the marketplace right now. And we recommended not to proceed with them. And some of them have shown up again. Jenkins Pond is a prime example, okay? So there are other checkpoints just beyond the dollar thresholds, 50,000, 100,000, whatever. There's also when you establish a number and we can't match it or be below it, we have to come for approval.
Councilor Roman?
Madam Mayor, I just recall, 8 years ago when we came on council, there was a discussion at that time about township office design. And basically we were asked to approve the designs at that time. So if we approve tonight, let's see, we're on 26, we approve $312,000 for project design, that be holding us to having to do the town hall project if we decide 6 months from now that we don't want to do a town hall and we already spent the $300,000 on drawings. I don't want to be in a position where staff go ahead and begin the process of bringing in architects and then we find out, oh no, council decided something different. Same with the NDCC or the Public Works. I just want to make sure that we're clear that we're just approving in principle project, we're not actually approving the project.
So the projects we're approving are the 2023 ones. That's it. The others are still up for discussion and review of the capital forecast. But they're in there as benchmarks saying if we want to do this, we have to still plan our dollars and cents today to be able to help to afford them later. So the only thing we truly approve is the 2023. Christina Brooks.
Madam Mayor, if I may also remind council, I did something a little differently on this spreadsheet. I tried to show those projects that are currently in progress and the dollars were approved last year and it just wasn't completed. So again, these are not necessarily new dollars. So for example, D8, the twin pad design, we awarded, council awarded that tender in 2022. We have not completed it. The amount there is the total spend over the 2 years for those design. So that project is already been awarded and in progress. However, if I take the town hall project at D1, we have not engaged anyone. So it was on 2020. We have.
So things like the town hall project, there are elements. I have to prepare a business case to council on different strategies related to options related to a town hall. Depending upon, if we're just looking at here at the NDCC, there's 3 potential locations. Each has a different price point. I've had to go to an expert in certain areas to help me get representative numbers to inform the model and the business case. If I was to look at a leasehold site, I would be consulting with legal counsel. What are the implications? What would be our potential cost exposures? So there are some elements that are helping retain professional services to deal with a scoped task to help us prepare and inform a business case, which would lead to a recommendation to council about what is the best way to deliver a town hall project. It doesn't mean that council will actually build a town hall or lease a town hall, but it will give you information allowing you to make an informed decision based on a series of scenarios. Now, if council, and I'm not saying the work that I'm doing will cost the full $312,000, but let's say the end of Q1, I come before council with the business case assessment and council says, okay, we want option 1, just to pick a scenario. There should be money in there that would allow us to start with the design component or the preparation of legal documents to implement the preferred scenario if that's where council goes. Then there's a construction budget, which would be in 2024 at the earliest.
Any other questions in regards? So we're not committed to anything right now. We're passing the 2023 budget and these things do move up in the future. We're planning for them. But should something arise that makes it not affordable, attainable, or something else, then we don't go forward. And there is a cost to looking into things, as CEO McNeely has stated, but that doesn't mean that we still move forward. Even after all this research is done, it's being found not appropriate for us to do so. This council decides that. You are not tied to any of this, but you are planning for it if we stay in good graces. Any other questions? Councilor Roman, Councilor Lee.
I was wondering, Madam Mayor, if Christina can tell us which of the projects in this section B facilities are actually in progress. Is it just the NDCC twin pad design that's in progress, or is there more than that?
Ms. Brooks.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councilor Roman, in the D section, there have been some preliminary items, as CEO McNeely has said, towards the business case development of the town hall, but we have not engaged anyone to like make drawings or anything of that
So
nature.
no commitment yet.
Correct. Also, the twin pad is in progress. And the fire suppression hoods, we got one in, I believe, Director. We had one in December, but the other two, due to timing delays on our contractor, he couldn't come till January to complete that. So that project is also currently in progress. The other ones that are carried forward, we've had some preliminary discussions or reviews, but we have not actually awarded the work out.
I have a completely different question, so are we done with this? Okay. All right, so my questions are related to three items, all around the Era Ice House. So it looks like there's a lot of money in the budget for a master plan, rehabilitation, for renovation. And it seems to me that is the only heritage building that is in the budget, and I was just wondering what made it this special, and if there were like an in-house ice house reserve, and I was just wondering if I could get some information on that one.
Neola, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is the only heritage building the Township of North Dumfries is actually the owner of. Okay, so we own the Air Ice House. Council 4 years ago, perhaps 5 years ago, adopted a bylaw under Part 4 of the Heritage Act to designate this as a provincially significant building. It's one of a handful of ice houses still left in Ontario. So it has a Part 4 designation to recognize its unique cultural and heritage attributes. It is owned by the township, hence why we're investing in our own building. We had a structural assessment done on the building 3 years ago. And because the question was, okay, we own this asset, but because it had not had seen much in the way of investment to keep it in a state of good repair, there was a question as to, has the building, because of exposure to weather, has it gone to a point where it's cost prohibitive to restore? So the the structural assessment had two focuses. Is the building structurally sound? Question one. And the answer to that was yes. Then the second question the consultant looked at was, what would the cost be to restore the facade, being windows, doors, the roof itself, and the exterior facade? What would that cost be to restore it back to period architecture and materials? So today we have an asphalt roof on it as an example. What would it be if we went to a shaking shingle or something comparable? The windows have been boarded up, putting in the former windows that would have been there by style, whether they were 4 or 8 over 8 pane window system. So we received prices for that and estimates, and council adopted that they were willing to look at restoring the exterior, no interior work. And monies were being put aside each year to allow for that restoration. So we were putting away 25,000 or so a year to deal with the phase 1, which was the exterior restoration of the Air Ice House. This has been put into this year's budget as a potential deliverable, because in 2024 is the 200th anniversary of the Community of Air. And the hope was that the work would be done through 23 or 24, and would be part of the unveiling of the 200th anniversary of the Community of Air.
I have one follow-up question. It's around the master plan. If we're already doing the facade and stuff like that, what is the master plan going to contain?
So the master plan is a different project, but it's in the same area, and we call it the Air Ice House Precinct. Okay, so the township owns a series of parcels in and around the Air Ice House, so Tannery Street itself, which accesses onto Stanley Street. We have where the old bowling greens were, which is a grassed area to the embankment of the Nith River. We have a sliver of land that goes from the Air Ice House up to Northumberland Street. So we own about 3/4 of what looks like a driveway beside the shortstop. And then there once upon a time was a cantilevered building on Northumberland Street that overtopped the outlet channel from Watson Pond into the Nith. Council had that building demolished. It sat on stilts and was suspect in terms of its structural integrity. So council had that removed, but we protected the ability to, as part of the master plan and the analysis coming out of that, to look at perhaps a cantilevered deck or a deck on stilts that would be like a lookout or a seating area over top of that outlet channel. So the purpose of the master plan was to look at opportunities and constraints, because that area we're talking about floods most springs, and in some cases by substantial depth. What could we program down there, recognizing the constraints? And then how could we, through a phased program, once council approves the concept, then look at building out public amenities adjacent to the Nith River? It's one of the few public land holdings that the township owns, either on the Nith River or the Grand River, where the public, through public land holding, could access the water body. So if we think of, just as an example, there's a demand for a boat launch for canoes or kayaks that could be incorporated into the design of the park, and there would be the proper facility to interface with the water's edge. There could be casual seating areas. There could be, we might look at a portable stage that could be floated in and out. So you couldn't put it structurally
In
there.
flood time.
We couldn't put it there structurally because of the flood, but it could be wheeled in and out. And we would have about hydro plugs that would provide lighting and power supply and things like that. So the aspect was to create public space downtown as a destination, to create public access, either to look onto the Nith or to access the Nith River, but also to support what I call two frontage development of the adjacent private properties. So everyone's familiar with the street frontage as a principal entrance into those businesses. There's also a rear elevation, and is there ability, some of those buildings are fairly deep, and new retail or office development doesn't necessarily meet the whole floor plate. So maybe you could have a unit that's maybe divided in half. Part fronts onto Northumberland and is accessed off of the sidewalk. Half comes off of Tannery Street and has a public face back into the redevelopment of Tannery Street and Nith. So it was on a way to create public space, leverage the opportunity of the river, but also it might incentivize redevelopment of some of those adjacent commercial properties and add more capacity or retail opportunities in the downtown core in that immediate stretch.
I was just wondering what as you were talking about it, Andrew, and changes with 23 and conservation changes. I'm wondering at some point, I've always said if we could do a walkway along the building to the ice house, raise it up so that the door is about 5-6 feet at ground level when you walk into a door, and we do a floor there, and we'll put the Preservation Society in our such group and have them actually have the guidance. But that's just the thought that we'll see what happens.
So one of the constraints would be servicing. Today, there's no water or sanitary sewer.
Well, with the flood, they have plenty of water. No, I'm kidding.
But, you know, if you create occupied space,
Yeah.
then we have, based on the nature of assembly, and use, we'd actually have to provide washroom facilities as well.
Because when I first talked about the ice house way back, I'm going 10 years. GRCA said the only thing we could use it for was to store the canoes in winter, and how about we use this for the boat launch? Which isn't a bad idea. If we can't use it, can't put it. And raised for it. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then we are at,
So, Madam Mayor, do you want a quick summary of the projects in section D of the capital forecast? I'm happy to give, 30-second, 45-second summary of each project.
okay, I'll time you, go ahead.
Okay, the Township Hall project, I think members of council are familiar with where we are and some of the scenarios that are being assessed. It is my hope to have a business case assessment available for Township Council on options and a go-forward strategy as a recommendation by the end of quarter one. The conversion of the community hall to fire administration, fire prevention operations. We have limited space. The chief's actually in a hallway right now, where his desk is. So the intent is to take what was the old community hall and put in proper meeting space, offices, open concept offices, modernize the washroom so it's fully barrier-free and universal, and to put a barrier-free access door for the public to come into fire administration. We are obligated under the accessibility for the AODA legislation in 2025 to be fully accessible. That building today is not, both by access, exterior, interior, and the washroom facility. This would not only provide the space for the fire department, fire prevention administration, but also ensure that we're fully compliant, because we could have employees that have a barrier issue. So we have to look at not only our own personnel, but also the public. The air filtration system. Today, there is nothing to exhaust diesel fuel emissions from the equipment and apparatus in that bay. So these air filtration systems, there are different types of technologies. We're proposing, basically, it looks like an air conditioning unit strapped to the ceiling and exhausted directly up through the ceiling. Other technologies would be like a hose that goes on the exhaust pipe of the truck, and as the truck drives out, it falls along a track and eventually it just pulls off the muffler. We feel that given the size of our fire station and fire hall, these ceiling mounted filtration systems will be perfect. They'll lower the exhaust emissions, and this is a health and safety related matter. The Public Works Depot Phase 1. In 2022, council set aside money to do a master plan to look at the spatial layout of the property we have, the constraints associated with it, and what would the future needs be to support a growing linear infrastructure system, both for our staff, equipment, and the resources that we deploy, like materials necessary to support Four Seasons operations. That work is well underway, and we're at a point where we'll be presenting the master plan for council's endorsement in quarter one. The actual Public Works Phase 1 is creating space in a dedicated building where our staff would have their offices, lunchrooms, showers, washroom facilities, and the like. Today, they're actually housed in a corner of the existing block building. And once again, from a safety perspective, it is not a good environment. So this is not only dealing with that issue, but it's also positioning us for the longer term. When we get to the capital forecast for discussion on the 26th, you will see that there is a Phase 2 and a Phase 3 over the 10-year horizon as we look at other components to create expanded areas to support the equipment and apparatus of the department, as well as the storage of materials. But they're done over a 10-year forecast.
I just want to bring the new councillors up to speed on this. This has been on the budget since 1990s. Keeps getting put off every year to the point that things were in a dire strait. And so I'm so pleased this is finally happening. Thank you.
So Madam Mayor, the next two projects, so I'm looking at D5 and D6, same principle, but there's two different addresses. One's the Public Works Depot, one is the NDCC. In 2019, we retained the consulting firm of Walter Fetty, which did a life cycle analysis of all of our facilities. And they made recommendations. There were some major components like roofs and plumbing systems and whatever. And they showed the specific projects, but every year there was a grouping of smaller projects that needed to go for repair or replacement just because they're at the end of their life cycle. So we grouped those smaller projects, like we're replacing a certain number of interior doors, or, excuse me, we're replacing out a hot water tank and things like that. These groupings deal with those minor items that are at the end of their life cycle. The NDCC ice compressor #2 replacement, we replaced the unit #1 last summer. If your council remembers, we did it on an emergency basis. We were told at that point in time, both units had to be done. One was in the worst condition. It got changed out. And so this year it's compressor 2. They were at or near their end of their operating life. The NDCC twin pad project design is in process. Council awarded contract in 2022. We have an architectural firm working on the drawings. We've gone through 2 iterative reviews of the drawings. They continue to make changes. We're challenged trying to blend the old building with the building code. Based on certain rated occupancies, you have to have a certain number of emergency escapes, and it has to be with. We have some of those mid-depth of building today. So the building, while it was always contemplated could be interfaced for twinning, the actual layout in some aspects frustrates the ability. So now we're having to figure out how do we deal with the code requirements and adapt space based on the existing building and ensuring that they can integrate, but also function independently. So we are working through this, and we will be bringing a report to council with a preferred scenario. And as a component of their work program, they're to give us a Class D cost estimate. So they would give us the order of magnitude of, okay, if you pick this option, this is what we would anticipate in today's market climate to be the cost to actually build this. Council at that point in time has to make a decision. You know, do we put it on a shelf? Do we go ahead and go to the marketplace? Because the contract, the consultant in council's direction is such, their project cost would bring us to a tender-ready package. The council has to authorize that next step. We're not there yet. Or council could just say, we are not building the project, and we stop right then and there. So those will be the scenarios that are available to council as conceivable options when we bring forward the business case, as well as I'll call it the preferred design for the project. The barrier lift, it's the replacement of the existing lift system at the ACC to ensure compliance with AODA. Today, we do have a lift. An individual that has a disability and wants to use the elevator has to ring a button. That would then activate a township personnel somewhere in the building. They could be on the ice. That person could notionally stand there for 10 or 12 minutes waiting for us to finish the ice so that we can turn on the elevator, key it so they can go up to the 2nd floor, and you got the return experience whenever their visit is over. Under AODA, one of the principles of accessibility is independence. So the cost here is to change out the existing lift and put in a proper elevator, as we have here in the NDCC. And we are proposing to access grant funding through the federal government's Enabling Accessibility Fund to help defray the costs of the capital build. The commercial fire suppression range hoods at various facilities. This is actually, as we said, an in process. Council gave us the money last year. We have started the projects and we've had some supply chain issues. We also have a budgetary issue here at the NDCC because our alarm system has to go all the way to the back of the building. So we have to wire the fire suppression system the full depth of the NDCC. So we're getting revised pricing. We will not be able to do the NDCC range hoods this year. But we will deal with ACC and Roseville.
How much is it?
About $35,000. Once again, all the activities up front and all the controls are 500 feet away. We've talked about the arrows, rehabilitation phase 1, the cupola. The building is fine, but if you take a look at the cupola, there's been damage to the cupola. Some of the vent panels have been damaged. And by the time we actually repair that and then tie back potentially some of the cedar shake where it exists, that's the nature of the project. And then the rest of the accounts are transfers to reserve. So these come out of our life cycle report that was done in 2019. So that we can have monies in various reserve accounts to fund works to be undertaken in the 10-year capital forecast. And these reserve transfers are specific to certain buildings, but the same principle exists whether I'm talking about rolling stock or the infrastructure or the parks. We have made a conscious decision to try and even out, for lack of a better term, projects so that we don't have to put it on the tax levy, that we can fund it through reserves, and it creates a little bit more consistency year over year in terms of our tax levy exposure. It also allows you to do the project and pay as you go. The only projects that would not be would be your significant major builds like the arena. In time, if we're looking at an indoor swimming pool and things like that, because you're looking at typically a building that has a life value of 50 years. So you may be looking at debt financing as a component of your funding stream, typically with a repayment over 20 years. Because then you're starting to get into now major life cycle replacements for the other 30 years. So, you know, what was initially a debt payment now becomes dealing with some of those life cycle repairs.
Any questions? Seeing none, can I have the motion, please?
Sorry, there's two items that we do require council direction on.
Right,
One is the Piper Street sidewalk. So at present,
that's the next motion.
yeah, so at present, we do have monies in the capital budget to construct a sidewalk on the north side of Piper Street from Rose Street. And then there was correspondence from an area resident about EV charging stations. So we have charger locations. So we have two separate documents to inform that discussion.
So that's the separate motion. So the motion I'm asking for is the ones in regards to capital budget of PEG, EV neighborhood, okay. So the first one says that the 2023 capital budget be updated to reflect the new project costs as follows. Project E7 neighborhood parkette construction Pier Challenger, 245,815, and project contingency of 23,582 plus HST. Project E8 neighborhood park construction Legacy Bruce, $820,918, and a property contingency of $115,537 plus HST. And that pre-budget approval be conferred to the following 2023 capital project items as indicated in this report to expedite the tendering and construction process of the 2023 capital budget project E7 neighborhood parkette street construction Pier Challenger And B, 2023 capital budget project E8 neighborhood park construction legacy P1 Bruce P18. So that's fine. Can't see all the areas, but I just wrote this. Do you want to read it?
Oh,
So now could you do your motion, please?
okay, we're not gonna discuss it.
We can. Yeah, go ahead. We can discuss it now. Go ahead.
Okay, because the option that is listed here in the motion is to approve the additional costs, right?
For the two parks.
Right. And I was just wondering, the parks, my question was to the mayor. The parks are funded by the development charges, if I understand correctly. And if we approve these increases to the parks, what else it will not be done for the development charges, or is this?
How does it impact the development charge for CO hearing?
So Madam Mayor, through you to Councillor Will, you are correct. These projects, because they're in emerging neighborhoods, are being created to serve those new residents that are moving into those respective neighborhoods. So that's why it's funded by development charges. There is sufficient funds in the development charges account present to allow for or accommodate the construction of these two facilities with the adjustments. Now, we have identified to council that if you do not want to increase these costs on what the consultant has advised, this is a change in the marketplace. There are some options to look at some value engineering to bring us either at, or in some cases, just marginally above what was historically as the budget estimate.
So what are those changes?
So, in the agenda, under my right section. So I'm in page 7 of the staff report. Down at the bottom of the page, the first one is the parquet construction for Freer Challenger. The consultants advise us that with the contingency and the net HST, we're looking at a spend of approximately 269,000. So we'd be looking at an additional ask of $29,140 to be funded from development charges. So what we've indicated with the council, top page 8, there's two options. One would be to approve the expenditure by amount equivalent to $29,140. Or option 2, there's a series of value engineering exercises that council could provide direction to bring the budget either down or below budget. One would be to reduce the size of the shade structure, and we've estimated that reduction, both because of the concrete pad as well as the structure itself, would be a savings of approximately $15,000. We could remove the modified multi-purpose court, which is proposed toward the north end of the parquet, adjacent the gas pipeline corridor. If we remove the multi-purpose court, there's a savings of $20,000. We could scale back the elements associated with the playground structure climbing apparatus. And if we were to do that, we would save $20,000. So part of that would be the actual structure itself, but then also the actual play area, because we have to have certain distances for fall arrest and whatever. So obviously if the play structure is smaller, then the associated curb around the play structure is smaller. The amount of asphalt at the edge of the walking surface would be smaller. So collectively, because of that change, there would be a savings of about $20,000.
Reducing the size of the shade structure. What's the original size and what would you reduce?
Karen, what's the size?
We do currently have a full size on it, but we have options to make it a smaller one. So it was a $45,000 cost estimate, and we're just suggesting we would bring it down to about $25,000.
Because if you add all these numbers up, did I write them down? 20, 40, 55,000, I think is with all three. So we only need to go down 30,000, so give you 25. Could you work out some scenario where you could bring it down to $30,000 and still give them some kind of decent working out? Like, I mean, the Purpose Court, I think has real value. The play structure, how small do you have to make it? So I think you've got good sense, Karen. So council, how do you feel about that? If we, instead of doing the maximum, which is an additional cost of $50,000, we have $50,000 to play with. We want to bring it down to 29. We want to take the 29 off of it. So we need to come down about 30,000. Is that right?
That's correct. In round numbers, yeah.
And there's 55. So if Karen could jiggle it and work it out so that we.
So essentially what you're asking, Madam Mayor, is you want to maintain the budget estimate that was in the December draft and staff work to that number.
That's what I'm suggesting. Councilor Tully.
In regards to, maybe I missed it, but I just maybe not caught it exactly how you said it. When Councilor Williams asked what kind of effect it will have if, on the budget, if we were to leave it as, by paying the additional 30,000, is that just coming out of funds that we already have set aside and we don't have to worry about that and it's already there, or do we have to get more?
No, there are sufficient funds in the development charges account to cover the additional spend that's been asked for in this report. So it doesn't affect the tax levy. We're not going into a different account to cross-pollinate to top it up.
I think the question is it affecting a future? Are those development charges going to get something else? Because if they're not, if they're free money, I have no problem with it.
So it does not affect our reserve continuity to pay for other capital projects that are DC funded in the 10-year forecast.
Councilor Tilly.
So my response would be everything goes up in time cost wise, so we can do it for $30,000 this year and not have to pay $45,000 next year, or whatever the difference may be. It makes sense to do it if it's going to be something that the park should have, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was under the opinion that it would affect, but if it's not going to affect, then I have no problems with it. And is that true for the legacy use one as well? That it will not impact the development charges, future development charges, future commitments?
So Madam Mayor, once again, this project is 100% funded by development charges. And the additional ask of funds above what was in the draft from December can be funded from the existing development charges account. And the reserve continuity for other DC projects in the 10-year forecast can continue to be funded from that account and would not be impacted.
Thank you.
The reality is what we've experienced. Our development charges bylaw on December 1st increased by a factor of 15%. Because that's what the construction price index showed for the the September to September period. These are original estimates that we were working on, we created in the summer. What you're witnessing basically is the increase that was quite significant. And that's why we're asking for these additional funds, because the marketplace has gone very expensive for certain types of construction related projects, and construction seems to be one of the highest inflationary sectors that's being experienced.
And my only concern is with Councilor Rose is that we're not impacting the future. And we're not, that motion, please, Councilor Rose. Oh, well, Councilor Rowland, I apologize.
I have a question, just regarding the new park in the south end, park. With regards to the junior ball diamond, I thought that we were concentrating our junior ball at Victoria Park, and then we had the senior or adult ball at Schmidt Park. So I'm just curious, why is there a need for a junior ball diamond at this location when we've already sort of directed our balls to those two parks?
So the junior ball diamond is not at the same standard that we have at Victoria Park. It's not meant to be a competitive level facility. Excuse me. This would be similar to what you witnessed at Piper's Glen. So it does have a backstop so that it controls a ball being thrown to a batter or to home plate, as the case may be. It will have a skinned infield similar to what you have at Piper's Glen, and you will have a small portion of fencing where people could sit waiting to take their turn. The outfield, similar to Piper's Glen, can be used for a wide range of both organized and unorganized play. So it would be graded such that it could be used for ball. It could be graded that you can do Tai Chi or whatever, or fly a kite. It will not have the same structural components or playability from a competitive level. What it does mean, similar to what we do in Piper's Glen, we run into a spat of bad weather and we have cancellations. It does allow some of the practices to occur at Piper's Glen and or this facility to get them back in their rotation so that they can focus their games at Victoria Park and make up their schedule, because they've only got a defined number of weeks to get their season in.
So can I have a motion, please? And you can read it in its entirety. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Nolan, that the 2023 capital budget be updated to reflect the new project costs as follows. Project E7, neighborhood parquet construction, Fear Challenger to 245,815, and project contingency of 23,582 plus agency. Project E8, neighborhood park construction legacy, Rose 820,918, and project contingency of 115,537 plus HC. And that pre-budget approval be conferred to the following 2023 capital project items as indicated in this report to expedite the tendering and construction processes. 2023 capital budget project E7 neighborhood parquet construction for Challenger, and 2023 capital budget project E8 neighborhood park construction legacy P1 Rose P1.
Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so 6.2 is the financial report capital forecast, which will be addressed at the January 26th meeting. And 6.3 is the report PW01 2023 Piper Street sidewalk extension, 2023 capital budget, Piper Street neighborhood meeting. So is anyone speaking on this, or do you want to just do the motion, or is anyone speaking on this?
So maybe I'll just provide a bit of context.
Please.
You may recall prior to the Christmas break, council received as part of an agenda a petition from residents in proximity to the intersection of Piper and Rose, questioning the need for this additional length of sidewalk on the north side of the road. The council asked to inform the 2023 capital budget because there was a sidewalk link and it's captured in the draft 23 capital. Council wanted more information. So we hosted an information meeting on January the 9th. Ms. Robinson prepared a PowerPoint presentation. We had 6 options that were available, right from do nothing through to a very sophisticated, pedestrian activated crosswalks and anything in between. The public provided their thoughts that were present. We also gave them the balance of the week to provide any written comments that they might have on the proposal. So Ms. Robinson's report identifies the summary that came out of the January meeting. And there is a change if council embraces it, which would be to abandon the construction of that sidewalk on the north side of the road from Rose West to where it ties into the existing link, and to enhance the existing crosswalk, which is located to the west of Rose, we call it at the bend. So if you were to go out there today, you would see 2 depressed curb portions linking the north and the south side of the road. And what we would be doing is putting an elevated crosswalk. So similar to what we're doing at Vincent Drive, we would be creating a platform that's raised to slow and modulate the speed of traffic approaching that mid-block crossing for enhanced pedestrian safety.
Councilor, any questions?
So what we're doing is we're asking to drop that project. There's a reduction of roughly 47,000 then in the sidewalk portion, and redeploy a portion of that fund, 30,000, to allow us to incorporate this new raised crosswalk.
Questions, Council? Council Tilly?
Two-part, I did see, I did read the report, I did understand it, but I want to be honest, I'd like to hear from those that are there, what the residences, the resident, the people that live in the residences nearby, what they said about it, and what you feel that they were trying to, what they want to go with. That's going to be that, because I did get a few different mixed message from that. Not 100% is what I'm saying. There's a bit of that. And then secondly, I had a question for Lee after that as well. So
Go ahead, Councilor.
Member to Councilor Tilly. At that meeting and also speaking with the neighbors, I live on Piper Street, so the neighbors, before and after the meeting. General consensus is that the current crossing is adequate where it is. They didn't want to see it moved, but they all basically agree that a raised crosswalk would just give the pedestrians a little extra, not necessarily safety, but a little extra ability to cross the road and have the traffic slow down. It's not necessarily the safest way to cross, but it's the preferred way of the neighborhood. So all the neighbors basically said they didn't want to cross over at Rose Street, didn't want new sidewalks. They walked on the south side for 150 years and they're not going to change. If we remove the sidewalk, we're still going to walk there and build a new crosswalk. We're not going to use it. So there was open civil disobedience basically. And so we decided that we would go ahead and basically agree with the community and leave the crossing where it was, but just make a raised crosswalk just to slow traffic down a little bit.
And I sort of saw their point. They talked about, see, the study was only done for the section within the Rose Street area. But there's this major part of Piper Street that carries on that is in it's empty space basically around Gladstone Street where traffic comes in at tremendous speeds. And but the one gentleman said if you stood at Rose Street at the curve where you wanted to put the sidewalk, the traffic coming in could never see you. And they don't slow down enough. I like the raised sidewalks because of the lines on the road that tell the traffic, and they're significant lines because they put the picture in that says there's something up ahead, there's a crosswalk ahead, maybe slow down a bit. You know, so that's why I kind of. So anything else you want to talk to me? So Lee, you're up next.
So Lee as well. I know originally this was a design for technical reason, and that's the part that I guess may or may not have gotten through. And I'm not trying to say that the people that live there don't know best, but I just want to get her opinion on whether or not this is something that she now agrees is the best thing for the area. So.
Through the mayor to Councillor Tilly, the issue that was raised historically when I had reviewed it is that crossing from a pedestrian point of view, crossing at a bend is not an ideal location to do that. Many of the residents' concern is that there has been no pedestrian accidents in that area. And my sort of response to that is, well, thank goodness. But I think that we have an elevated potential in that area, and that is the concern. It's not that it hasn't, you know, that I realize that it hasn't happened, but my concern is, of course, going forward that it actually does not occur. Raised crosswalks are not the absolute safest possibility. They're significantly better than the situation that currently exists, and I do support the use of the raised crosswalk. I would prefer to see a raised crosswalk in that area rather than residents continuing to cross at that location without any kind of protection.
Go ahead, Councilor Tilly, okay?
So perfect. So what I hear saying is that this is a good trade-off, and that keeps everybody happy and no more disobedience, and we're all good.
That is correct. I would recommend that this is my technical recommendation.
So Councilor Bowman, the motion, please.
Myself, by Councilor Tilly, PW report number 01/2023 be received. The council, as part of consideration throughout 2023 capital budget, undertake the following revision. 1, pursue the installation of a raised crosswalk as a new project location of the existing mid-block crossing on the bend of Piper Street, west of Rose Street, projected cost of $30,000 to be funded from the infrastructure reserve fund, and to abandon construction of sidewalk extension on the north side of Piper Street, west of Rose Street. Reduce construction of new sidewalks, missing links, project C11 by amount equivalent to $45,000.
All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, and next we have 6.4 memorandum from Andrew McNeely, Chief Administrative Officer regarding discussion paper for 2023 capital provision of electrical vehicles charging stations. CO McNeely, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This discussion paper was prepared in response to correspondence that council received from Mr. Whitfinden. And Mr. Whitfinden has asked the council install electric vehicle charging stations, both to support residents that don't have access to such a piece of infrastructure on their private property, and or to support future travel into the village or the township by outside parties that may be here to visit or shop or whatever the experience may be. So this report sort of provides, I hope, a little bit of an overview and context of electric vehicle stations and what the township's position has been with respect to electric charging stations. So at a high level, we as a municipality have embraced the Transform WR objectives, and there were 3 action items arising from that paper with respect to electric vehicle stations. Problem with electric vehicle stations are we're continuing to learn about them. And there is a wide variance of cost associated with it, both from the one-time capital as well as annual operating. So I have given you the best that I know as a general statement as to potential capital exposure, but really until you select what kind of charging station you want, that then confirms the draw by power, 30 amp or a 50 amp or 100 amp service. Then that tells you your gauge of wire. And then you've got your travel distance to your power supply. So depending upon where we look at putting this and the type of technology we deploy, your capital costs could be very wide ranging. So that's issue 1. Issue 2 is the longer term operating exposure. These are very sophisticated machines. Because they are, and there's the ability not only to discharge power, think of a safety aspect, but also the cost of delivering power to energize and charge up a vehicle. So if council is going to do a recovery on the hydro to plug in a vehicle and charge it, now you're looking at a system that has to have some sort of remote payment opportunity, whether it be through debit or credit. So now you're looking at Wi-Fi technology, you're looking at financial transactions so that it can be received and processed. You are also, because you are charging potentially a fee for a service, we're obligated to have that continually calibrated to make sure that there is a true connection between power usage and the charge value. Think of your fuel pumps. You always see, it's been corrected to a value of a certain temperature. Those are certified every year by an independent party to make sure that the pumps are truly representative of the amount of discharge of fuel and the corresponding price. We have to do the same thing with these remote chargers. So you can see that there's an operating entity. We do not have the inside capacity to do it. So what I'm asking of council is a sort of a 4-step process. So if you go to page 4 of my memo, this program has merits. We've already said that we would participate. So that's not the question. It's more, let's make sure we got our ducks lined up And we are properly not only installing it in the right location with the right technology, but we're also got properly in place the longer term requirements to maintain them in a state of good repair. So I've identified in question one, give us time to go out, look at our properties, where could we put it? What would it look like? And based on what the existing infrastructure could support in terms of an energy demand. We could find in some locations, a 50 amp service could be good. We may find in other locations because of our existing fuse panel, let's say in a parking lot, we may only have a 30 amp one capacity available. Well, the difference is an hour charge at 30 amp gets you about 35 kilometers of drive time. 50 amp gets me closer to 60 or 65 kilometers of travel distance. So there's different characteristics based on the address, and I'll call it the practicality, and we'll be able to better price out what it would cost at each address. I propose to return in early quarter 2 of 2023 with that report. The ability to incentivize and educate and inform the broader business as well as commercial enterprises. So think of a Foodland as an example, or Home Hardware, but also our local employers. There are programs out there that would provide subsidies to allow them to build capacity and make them available either at a corporate level or as a plug-in to visitors and patrons to their destination. There's an opportunity then to extend and complement what we may do as a municipality, and obviously then increase the venues where electric vehicles could be charged up. That's something that we would like to engage in that strategy and communicate it to our business community and see whether or not there's a willingness on their part to grow the opportunity. In quarter 2 of 2023, I'd like to issue a request for proposals. So once I understand where we might be doing this and what the technology would look like, I want to bring a report to council that talks a little bit about the long-term operating implications, put that in a form of an RFP, and if council's comfortable with that approach, we would go to the marketplace so that once these EV stations are actually operational on township properties, we actually have somebody who would operate them and maintain them. So, that could be everything from we allow it to be on our property, but basically they operate it and incur the maintenance obligations and the operating costs through to a partnership where they do the technology and maintenance and whatever, and they take certain proceeds and we keep the residual of the proceeds. Depending upon how we want to frame it, there's different scenarios. But it's important, if we're going to look at a capital investment, we have to understand how we're going to deliver the operating component the day one it starts. The last aspect is the federal government has a very attractive grant program. There is over $600 million identified in earlier federal budgets. That program has a life through to 2027. And there is opportunity, depending upon the nature of the technology and the output of a scalable grant per charging station. We would qualify, but so would some of our commercial or business operators. That's why I want to do the community engagement strategies. They may not be aware of this initiative and how it could benefit them. So while I looked at it exclusively from the municipality's perspective, there's also an opportunity for others to look at this. So the grant portal isn't open right now. But I would anticipate that as soon as the federal budget's dealt with, there'll be a release. And if I look at 2022, grant applications closed somewhere around August of 2022, and they were notifying award winners at the end of 2022. So that would be the release of funds, and you'd actually probably witness a bill then in fiscal year 23. I'm assuming the same kind of timetable will emerge for fiscal year 23. But the most important thing is there is a grant program out there to help us substantially reduce the one-time capital build. It's tailored for municipalities. We should leverage it if we're going to do a go forward. The residual of the cost, so if we can capture 75%, which notionally is available to municipalities, the residual costs of the construction installation, we do have funds set aside in a green strategy. Township Council a couple of years ago, understanding the dynamics of Transform WR and our longer commitments, started to put away money in a green reserve. We could fund the difference between the capital build, the grant, and fund it out of that green strategy so that there's no implications on the tax bill for the capital component. And then we'll have that discussion about the annual operating in that separate report that I'm going to bring to you in Q2.
Thank you, Senator McNally. Now, the motion that reads, and I'm going to ask that, the clerk change it, but it says that the memorandum from Andrew McNally, Chief Administrative Officer, regarding discussion paper for 2023 capital budget provision for electric vehicle EV charging station be received. I want it to change to be received and that to come back with the future.
I would just list those 4 action items in the resolution. So you're receiving the memo. And these are the action items that council expects as it relates to the EV program in the early part of 2023.
Thank you. Councilor Bowman.
Madam Mayor, I have a question for the CEO, through the CEO. With regards to the first part of that of the proposal, it seems to me that there's already a lot of private sector projects available. Example, I was working with ChargePoint to provide EV charging at my business, and they already have a preset package, so you can choose different amperages based on their package. There's one where you can have available just for your own employees, or you can have available if you want to public. So I'm wondering, instead of having council try to figure out what we want to have for how many amps we want to be able to provide, would it make more sense to look at the private sector first, like the Flows and the Ivies and the ChargePoints, see what programs they have available, and then we can shoehorn our existing amperage into their programs?
So the only thing I'm not aware of is, okay, so we put out, call an open call. The township's exploring the feasibility of EV stations. And we identify specific addresses where we control the asset land. And we propose these to be available for consideration on EV stations. We're asking them to truth out the location, identify the appropriate technology, what the order of magnitude costs would be for the install, and then their program for the long-term operation and maintenance.
So yeah, I think, because it seems to me like, for example, in the city of Cambridge, basically they said we want to have EV charging stations behind City Hall. We want EV charging stations in our parking lot, such as the old post office parking lot. They reached out. I know they have some Flow and they have some ChargePoint stations, so they reached out to the private sector. And from what I understand, ChargePoint, for example, is running the charging stations at the City Hall and at the old post office, for example. In comparison, the Cambridge Center Mall has, I think, 3 charging stations run by ChargePoint that are all free. There's no cost because they're trying to come to the mall shop, so you get free charging. City of Cambridge charges $3.80 for a 2-hour session, gives you about 50 kilometers in range. So it's all different ways to do it, but it appears to me that ChargePoint is actually responsible for running, because when those chargers are not functioning, you're not calling the City of Cambridge, you're calling ChargePoint, and they come up with it. So I believe they're maintaining it.
So I think we're getting to the same point. I guess what I'm concerned about is if we do a proposal call at the very front end, what is the cost that they're going to charge us to do the due diligence and the design and I'll call it the truthing of the feasibility of the various addresses? And I guess that was what my concern is. And that's why I said that staff would do that initial review. And then we would go to the marketplace as the second step, if council is comfortable with the approach.
Councilwoman,
Would your counterpart at Cambridge be able to provide you the information as how they did it?
I can inquire as to who their staff person that led it. But to your point, they've got a hodgepodge of different scenarios, and I don't know whether they championed them or if someone approached them and said, can we use your property? Oh, by the way, we'll take on the burden, capital and operating, but you provide this swath of land for these charging stations free of cost. You know, I don't know the scenario that they did. I was trying to put us in front where we would control where, on what terms, and then the company would bid based on our vision.
Councilor Tilly.
Councilor Roman, I understand you have intimate knowledge of electric vehicle charging and stuff. Is your understanding, and I'm just trying to get this in my mind here, is your understanding that a 50 kilowatt station is sufficient, or does it need to be a bigger one? Is that something, as an electrician, I'm just looking at this from a technical standpoint?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, to Councilor Tilly. Most charging stations after 2-hour session get about 50 kilometers of extra range. So other than the ones at the en routes, which are the fast charging stations where you receive 80% of your range in about 20 minutes, but you pay a lot of money for it. Most of them are the free ones, or the ones that are low cost. So a 2-hour session, you get about 50 kilometers additional range. So it's not super fast charging, but it's reasonable charging.
So to continue, so my quick research here shows that so one of the smaller ones would be about in line with what is in the report, about $28,000, and then one of the faster ones would be around $75,000, and then to get one of the 350 kilowatt, which is the Lexus brand name, I guess, but the $140,000 price mark. Now, obviously, when people are coming and going, they want to pay more for whether or not it makes sense to invest in something that's going to work better for people who are going grocery shopping. It's a huge dollar amount, obviously different between the three options there, especially between the highest and lowest. I'm just wondering what is the best. If we get, when I go personally shopping, I don't just buy the cheapest because it's going to be the easiest thing to buy. I buy what's going to be the best long-term investment. And so when I'm looking at this, I'm wondering, for people, if we're going to be increasing, obviously, and it is increasing the amount of people that are getting electric vehicles, does it make sense to do that research, know what it is? And maybe that's what Tia McNeely is referring to, is that whoever we're going to be dealing with will already come with this in their hand, but we'll still have to give some direction. So what my request would be that we get an understanding of what is the best investment level if we're going to be putting dollars and cents to it in order to get the best result. Because I obviously we have to do stuff like this.
And I think we're getting into weeds here. I think CEO McNeely has his walking papers. Also, when you consider if you're coming to a hockey game here at the NDCC, you know you got 2 hours in. So, you know, you may not need the rapid charger. If you're going to a grocery store, for example, you may need the rapid charge. So I think we have to look at where and the purpose of the destination. So too as well, but we'll leave that all up to CEO McNeely if that's all right with council. Are there any further questions? Council Roman.
I guess the only other question we have is the issue of do people have an expectation that charging is free? Because as you know, as I found out, when you own an electric vehicle, charging is not free in most cases. I mean, I know initially Tesla had free charging for life kind of thing, but that's by the wayside now. So now everyone I talk to has an electric vehicle understands you're going to be paying for your charging. So the gentleman that sent the correspondence, if he's asking for free overnight charging, I don't think that's what council's going to be discussing. I think we're discussing having a pay for charging option.
And that will also come out through CEO McNeely's report down the line. So we're still just in the initial phases. So I'm saying, let's look into this. So any other questions then? Councillor Tilly, would you please read the motion?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Roman, that the memorandum from Andrew McNeely, Chief Administrative Officer, regarding the discussion paper for 2023 capital budget provision of electric vehicle EV charging stations be received, and that staff identify potential locations for the EV charging stations on municipal properties or facilities for public use. As part of this review, staff would identify projected costs and the nature of technology to be utilized at the locations. Staff would return in early Q2 of 2023 with a report to council with an update. And that the staff initiate a public engagement strategy targeted at employers, multi-residence unit property owners, and commercial property owners to advise the federal government's zero emission vehicle infrastructure program and how they can access the grant program. And that the staff return to council in Q2 of 2023 with a framework of a request for proposal wherein the township would seek a partnership with the private sector company to operate and maintain EV charging stations that be established on the municipal properties or facilities, and that the staff monitor the grant portal window for the 2023 release of the zero emission vehicle infrastructure program and report to council upon notification that the grant applications are being accepted.
All those in favor? That's carried. We are now at the biological confirmatory bylaw, please, Council Gomes.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Rowland, that bylaw number 3379-23 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on January 19, 2023. Be read a first, second, and third time and be finally passed, signed, and sealed by the mayor and clerk.
All those in favor? That's carried, thank you. And now the adjournment, please, Council Rowland.
Myself and Councilor Tilly, that whereas this is for the special budget council meeting has been completed at 8:03 p.m. and be resolved that this meeting adjourns. Meets again on Thursday, January 26th at 6 p.m. for special budget council.
All those in favor? Carrie, thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening.